Hi guys! Today we're starting a new section, 2-7, Solving Proportions. I'm only going to post one video today, which will have a homework assigned to it, and then I'll post our second video about this topic tomorrow to help you spread things out and to help you with your time management. Before we can learn how to solve proportions, we need to know what a proportion is. Here's the definition of proportion. A proportion is an equation, so something with an equal sign, that states that a ratio is a comparison of two numbers, so a fraction, are equal. So an equation that states that two ratios are equal, like this. Each individual fraction is called a ratio. So A over B is a ratio and C over D is a ratio. And when I say that they're equal to each other, that becomes a proportion. We do have to state that the denominators are not zero because it is mathematically impossible to divide by zero. Here is another example of a proportion. 1/2 is equal to 3/6. Those are each individual ratios, and they are equivalent. Now, we're in algebra class, so we need to solve our proportions. So I will be solving. So I'm going to throw some variables in there that we can solve for. Today, I'm going to show you two different methods of how to solve a proportion. In your homework tonight, it will very specifically tell you which method you must use. So make sure that you're paying attention to both methods. And I want you to give them both a nice, fair try before you decide which one is your favorite. So again, make sure to read the directions on tonight's homework and use the appropriate method. Our first method is called the multiplication property. In this method, what we will do is we will multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD, the least common denominator. To determine what the least common denominator is, you need to look at the denominators of your fractions, and you need to think of a number that can be divided evenly by 8 and also by 12. So think of a number that you can do that number divided by 8 and it works nicely, and that number can be divided by 12 and that also works nicely. What I will do to try to find my LCD is I will start with the larger number. So between 8 and 12, that would be 12. And first I will check that number and see 12. Can 12 be divided by 8? And the answer is no, not nicely anyway. Then I'll check the multiples of 12. So it's like skip counting. If I start with 12, the next number I would count would be 24. So then I ask myself, okay, well, can I do 24 divided by 8? And the answer is yes. And since we skip counted by 12s to get to 24, we know that 24 can also be divided by 12. If the next one didn't work, we would have kept going. So next we would have tried 36 and then 48. And you just keep going until you find one number that can be divided by both of them. But in this problem, it's the number 24. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 24. And notice that I wrote the 24 on top. And what will happen is when you multiply by the 24 on top, and you have this over 8 on the bottom, that is actually dividing by 8. So even though I'm multiplying by 24, I'm actually doing 24 divided by 8, and that divides nicely. That's why we chose 24. Okay, so 24 divided by 8 is 3. And then we can do the same thing on the other side as well. So 24 divided by 12, divided by the bottom number, is 2. And so what I've done is I've canceled out all of my denominators, leaving me with only the numerators or only whole numbers. Now you'll take whatever you have left over and you'll times it by whatever was in the numerator. So I'm going to take this 3 times the 7, and I'm going to take this m times the 2. And that gets me here. Now for my final step, I will divide by 2. And I get 21 over 2, or this is a nice decimal, it's 10.5, so it would also be appropriate to write this as a decimal. This again is called the multiplication property. The first part of your homework will be on the multiplication property. So make sure that you are finding an LCD, you are multiplying on each side and canceling, and then continuing with the problem. The second half of your homework today will tell you to use something called cross products. So let's talk about cross products now. Again, we're solving proportions today. Product is a fancy math word for multiplication. So when I say cross products, I'm actually asking you to cross multiply. When you cross multiply, you're multiplying diagonally through the equal sign. The bottom of one fraction times the top of the other. The bottom of one fraction times the top of the other. It's very important when you're cross multiplying that when you're done, there's no more fractions. So you are actually taking your denominators and pushing them up through, and they become part of the numerators. It's not taking the bottom up here and the top down here, and it's still a fraction. So there should be no more fractions. There should, though, still be an equal sign. So let's take a look at cross products. When I'm multiplying through, I'm going to take the bottom of one fraction, x, and multiply it times the top of the other, 4. And I'm going to write that on one side of my equal sign. It honestly does not matter which side you write it on. Then, separately, I'll take the bottom of the other fraction, the one I haven't used yet, and multiply it by the top of the diagonal fraction. And then I just have to make sure that I write that one on the other side of the equal sign. So notice I did x times 4, and I wrote that on the left side, and then I did 3 times 8, and I wrote that on the right side. And there is still an equal sign. There's just no more fraction bars. And then we can continue. So 3 times 8 is 24, and then I would divide by 4 on both sides, and I get my final answer of 6. So this, again, the book calls it cross products. Product means multiplication, so this is cross multiplying. So make sure to read the directions, and if it says to use cross products, it wants you to multiply diagonally through the equal sign and then solve for x. Make sure that you're using the right method on your homework. Make sure that you give each method a fair try before you decide which one you like best. By tomorrow, you should know if you prefer cross products or the multiplication property, and then you can make that choice tomorrow. But for right now, we're all done, and I'll see you later.